Oh, hi everybody. Welcome to Outward Bound Canada's third speaker series. We're just so excited to have everybody join us today with the Outward Bound, bringing the Outward Bound community together from coast to coast. We've got an awesome panel of speakers lined up, and it's just going to be so great to hear some of the stories, both from some of our alumni, as well as a special guest, Adam Shoalts, who has written a number of books about what he's learned through traveling through the outdoors, through pretty rigorous and extensive expeditions. So just really thrilled that you can all join us. As we get started here, I just wanted to take a few minutes to just kind of let folks know what Outward Bound has been up to over the course of what this pandemic has been, and speak a little bit about where we're heading in 2021. And also just really excited to hear from our former executive director, Sarah Wiley, who's been doing a lot of great work with both Outward Bound Canada and Outward Bound International, and just to share a couple stories of what's happening with Outward Bound in the 37 countries that we operate in around the world. Before we get going, I really wanted to just acknowledge the fact that Outward Bound Canada, we acknowledge that we operate in the traditional territories of so many Indigenous people across the country. In our day-to-day work, we try to honor the ways of knowing, and we try to find partnerships, and to work in partnership with local communities, and an understanding of local Indigenous knowledge keepers, and to incorporate their worldviews and teaching into the way we work. Sometimes when we talk about land acknowledgements, it can be a little impersonal, but I can assure you that the work that Outward Bound does, it's extremely personal to the work, what we do, as we recognize that the work we do is on traditional territories, and the work that we're trying to do and trying to continually get better to learn from Indigenous ways of knowing, and adapting to those things and to those ways of knowing. So it is really critical to what we do, and also it's something that we are continuing to learn about. We are by no means got it figured out, and by no means is it perfect for Outward Bound. So just to acknowledge that. So as we look at the pandemic and what it's done, the stories of the pandemic are just so clear. We see them over and over every day. And as anybody who knows anything about Outward Bound Canada, you can only imagine the impact it's had on our organization. We rely on bringing groups of people together, and as you may know, a lot of it revolves around community and actually really close interactions. So unfortunately, we had to adapt pretty quickly, and where in a normal summer we would have seen 2,500 to 3,000 people going through our programs. This year that's been significantly curtailed, and actually not even be able to operate overnight programs for young people under the age of 18. That being said, as you may have seen on the way into the webinar, we've adapted our practices to actually get our programs back out into the field. And starting in mid-August, through a partnership that we have primarily with the Canadian Wildlife Federation, which is a fully funded program through the Government of Canada, we're able to get a number of our programs back up and running, as well as some open enrollment programs where we offered some scholarships, and so a few other programs with other partners. So all that said, it's really helped us understand how that we actually can operate in this environment, and that's setting us up for a 2021 that we think is going to be a lot more positive than this year. I also just wanted to thank all of our staff in particular. It's been a real challenge as we change every day and adapt, whether it's the admin staff in our office or our instructors. They've just done an amazing job of being adaptable, and there's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in trying to move Outward Bound forward, and so thank you to them, and our volunteers through our board of directors, the cabinet, our governor's council, and all of our ambassadors. The support you've shown us means a ton, and so we just wanted to say thank you to all of you as well. We would not literally be here if it wasn't for you, so thank you. As many of you know, and for those of you who are joining or this is your first Outward Bound experience, you know, we are a charity. We're an educational charity, and our whole mandate is to help young people, you know, understand what their capabilities are around, you know, social. It's really about social and emotional learning. And so because of the pandemic, you know, a lot of our revenue streams have, you know, have been really damaged by that. And but many of our funders have stuck with us through that to make sure that we can continue to operate, and we are doing that. So as we kind of look forward, I think one of the things that we are looking at 2021 with a lot of great optimism. And I think as you'll hear from some of the panelists today, and maybe from your own experiences with Outward Bound or other types of organizations like us, you know, the issues that we're seeing in society, that, you know, the pandemic has really just revealed and made worse some of the things that we've already known about, you know, issues around systemic racism, mental health, inequity and inequality between, you know, rich and poor, and, you know, just a, you know, a greater, you know, degree of polarization. You know, before this, the pandemic hit, I had an opportunity with a number of our Outward Bound community members to participate in one of the Ramsey talks, where Susan Rice, the Ambassador Rice, spoke, and she said that in light of the polarization and that was happening in the U.S. in that country, you know, one of the best things that we could do, or that she thought could be done, is to bring young people together from really diverse backgrounds, many different backgrounds, and compel them into service, and service meaning, like, you know, service projects, environmental service. And that made me really think about what we do at Outward Bound. It's one of the highlights, I think, of our program that's different than so many others, is that when you look at our, you know, many of our programs, we bring people together who might never meet each other, and allow them, you know, this experience to, you know, walk in each other's shoes for, you know, whether it's 5 days, 2 weeks, or a month, and the power of that coming together, and the learning experience that has is immeasurable. And so I would just agree with Ambassador Rice, and I hope many of you would as well, that type of programming is so important. And then, you know, in some way we'll hear some of these themes, I think, from the panelists today, and just really excited to hear from them. So anyway, thank you all again. I will see you very briefly at the end of this as well as we wrap up. And for now, I'm just going to pass over to Sarah Wiley quickly to give us a sense of what's happening with Outward Bound around the world. And then we'll quickly move into our panel. So thank you, everybody.
Great. Hi, everyone, and thanks, Andrew. Really great to be part of this today, and thanks for joining us, and thanks as well to our guests and our panelists. I also want to do a big shout out to Andrew, because Andrew's been executive director for over a year now, about almost a year and a half, and I really cannot imagine a better person to shepherd the organization through this really challenging times. I'm kind of like, whew, feel like you know, it's a tough year, and Andrew has and his team have done an incredible job. And I feel really, really positive and confident about the future of Outward Bound Canada under his leadership. So just wanted to get that out there, Andrew, and thanks to you for all your support. As Andrew said, I'm now working with Outward Bound International, and a lot of people don't know that Outward Bound Canada is part of this larger global network. There's actually 37 schools spread across 6 continents, and impacting about 150,000, maybe more than that, of individuals every year. And it's been Outward Bound has been operating globally for almost 80 years. So next year, 2021 will be the 80th anniversary of the first Outward Bound program, which was in the UK. Outward Bound International is the coordinating organization for that network. In many ways, it's the custodian of the network, and it works to support the individual schools and also coordinate global collaboration and global initiatives. And one of those that we've launched this year, which is really exciting and which I think will really help all of the schools going forward, is we've created a global outcomes measurement initiative. And so we're looking at our programs right across the globe, and we're looking at the outcomes from our programs to provide not only evidence of outcome and evidence of impact, but also where are those areas that we maybe need to focus more on. Where can we focus our training so that we can be more impactful and more effective? And Outward Bound Canada is actually taking a real lead in that initiative, and so I'm really proud of that as well. Outward Bound is an educational initiative, and it was born out of global crisis. So the year was 1941, and the global crisis was World War II. And so here we are almost 80 years later, also in global crisis. Huge challenges faced by the pandemic, climate change, racial injustice, mental and physical health challenges, and increasing social disconnection and isolation. And so, I really feel so strongly that Outward Bound's purpose is more relevant than ever. And our really unique brand of learning through adventure and compassion is more needed than ever. The Outward Bound model is very enduring, and it's also been very successful because it is so replicable and adaptable. It's been replicated in different countries, different regions, in different environments, from remote wilderness to urban park grounds, and also to address the needs of diverse cultures, diverse political systems, and populations. It's taken hold and flourished in countries as unique and diverse as Oman, Vietnam, Hong Kong, New Zealand, Costa Rica, Bermuda, Brazil, Romania, Croatia, Germany, Canada, United States, New Zealand, Australia, Slovakia, South Africa. And we have new entities in Bahrain and also in China. And although the core of the work that Outward Bound does around the globe is focused on youth, it's also being adapted to meet the needs of adults in transition, and also special populations such as veterans in transition, survivors of trauma, and Indigenous populations. The model is not only adaptable, but it's also incredibly resilient. And we've really seen this year. All Outward Bound schools around the world are struggling and challenged with how do you run a program which is meant to be about bringing people together into these close, situations and connections when we can't do that. And I've been really inspired by what I've seen across the network for how schools are managing it. Outward Bound UK, which is where the model started, their model is mostly center-based. So they bring lots and lots of school kids. 80% of their participants are there through funding, and they bring lots of kids to their centers and run adventure programs. Well, they haven't been able to do that, but they've repurposed and taken all that funding and offered adventure days to young people right across the UK so that they can still have experiences. They've also started to go to some of their partnering organizations. So rather than having them come to their centers, they're going to the schools and to the organizations to run programs and day programs. Outward Bound Oman has really been focusing on what do we do post-pandemic, if whatever that looks like, when people start to come together again, and acknowledging that young people are probably going to need some help in terms of managing going from that relative social isolation and kind of making sense of some of the challenges at this point. And so they've developed a whole curriculum around this, around mental and mental health, and how to address these needs once restrictions are lifted. And in Canada and in the USA, New Zealand, where it's mostly wilderness and remote programs, our team in Canada has worked really hard to revise protocols and policies and processes so that we can run programs for some people and do it in a safe way and in a managed way. So we've been able to be resilient, but it has been hugely challenging, as Andrew has said, and there's no doubt the next year is going to continue to be. And so it's so crucial that we can find ways to continue to support this work and this kind of learning. It's so important, it's so relevant, and I really believe it's crucial for the future of our planet. I wanted to highlight those two themes of adaptability and resiliency because I think they're so core to Outward Bound's model. And I think undoubtedly we'll hear from our alumni, Shelby and Sooriya, as well, how adaptability and resiliency played into their Outward Bound experience. And I'm sure also reflected in Adam's experiences and his stories. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion. I hope you enjoy it. And I also would really encourage you to engage further with Outward Bound, however that might look for you. I'm now going to just pass over the virtual mic to Marika Chandler, who's our moderator for today's discussion.
Great, thanks so much, Sarah and Andrew. I'm excited. This is our third speaker series, and previously we've been able to focus on some of the themes of resilience, connection to self, others, and nature. And today we're really looking at, what is that personal leadership? What is it that that really gets developed and built through experiences like Outward Bound? And we're going to hear that from our three guests. So just to introduce myself, I'm Marika Chandler. I'm the Ontario Director for Outward Bound, and I'm excited to be able to moderate this discussion again. If just a prompt, I know it was put in the chat on the side, but if there are any questions that come up, please feel free, just make sure you address them to everyone instead of just the panelists. And then at the end, we'll save some time to get to those questions that you might have. So without further ado, I want to introduce who we have here with us today. So I'm really excited that we have three guests, as you've already heard. We have Sooriya, who's a former student of Bendale Business and Technical Institute, located in Toronto, and he's a 9-time OBC alumni. And he's also recently started his own not-for-profit organization in his home country of Sri Lanka, and we're going to get to hear a little bit about that later on. So Sooriya, thanks for joining us today. We also have Shelby Gagnon, who's an Anishinaabe Cree artist from Arrowland First Nation, but has lived in Thunder Bay for most of her life. And she's currently working with the Indigenous Food Circle on a project called Understanding Our Food Systems, and she's a project coordinator there. She's promoting and supporting awareness around food sovereignty, security, climate action, and advocacy for the protection of the land and the waters. And she participated in her first Outward Bound Canada course this summer. I'm so excited to have somebody who participated in a course in 2020. She came all the way down from Thunder Bay to Temagami and did a canoe trip with us. So thanks for joining us, Shelby. And of course, last but not least, by any stretch of the imagination, we have Adam Shoalts with us. Adam's a professional explorer, a best-selling author of 3 books, including Alone Against the North, Beyond the Trees, and it's epic stories about journeying alone in the Canadian Arctic, and just really excited to have you with us here as well. Adam, I'm going to start with you. Your career has been really vast. You've mapped rivers, you've led expeditions sponsored by, pardon me, the Royal Canadian Geographic Society and MEC. You've done archaeological digs. You've done 4,000 kilometers solo. When we talk about canoe tripping, I mean, that's a long solo, and not just anywhere, but in the Canadian Arctic. And that was the topic of Beyond the Trees. Now, in that book, you talk about portaging to the Dismal Lakes, which I think is just an incredible name. And it sounds like one of the most difficult parts of your journey, and something that would challenge just about anybody on the planet. And to kick us off, what was it that kept you going? I'm sure in the Arctic you're facing wind, bugs, exhaustion. Just what keeps you going step after step in that kind of challenge?
Well, I don't think portaging is that bad. That's a lot easier than dealing with the stress of modern life, and you're in traffic, or you've got 1,000 unread emails in your inbox. I would take a portage to the Dismal Lakes any day of the week over that. And actually, that wasn't out. I wouldn't put that on the top of my list of the worst parts of my 4,000 kilometer journey, because the landscape there was actually very beautiful, and there was an abundance of wild berries, and I saw herds of caribou. So there was plenty to keep my spirits soaring and my motivation high out there. And I guess what I say, what I'm doing is I'm just doing what I love, so it comes easy for me. I wouldn't go wandering alone across the Arctic tundra if I didn't really love it. I mean, it's not like you do that for the money. So I'm simply following my passion, and that keeps my spirits up and gets me doing. It's a lot harder if you ask me, like, how do you get through, like, another email, or you've got to do paperwork, that's much harder. I'm always behind on my paperwork. You know, I've just done 2 expeditions for the Royal Canadian Geographical Society, and they're sending me emails saying, why haven't you finished these reports? And I'm saying, because I'm going out in the woods and looking for wild mushrooms and things. So yeah, I'll take a portage any day of the week, because that's what I'm passionate about. It's all the other things that sort of slow me down and trip me up. But I guess that's how I would answer the question. It's finding the things you love and pursuing them.
It's really great, and I think that's so relevant to today, you know, finding those small pieces that are keeping us going while we're facing such challenges. You know, it's our own 4,000 kilometer journey in some sense, what we're going through right now. Thanks so much, Adam. Sooriya, you've done a number of Outward Bound courses and some trips on your own, and Shelby, as I mentioned, you did your first course, and I'm sure you two have faced you know, separate challenges on those courses, and I'm curious maybe what, you know, similar to what Adam, what helped you persevere with that, and just what's your perspective? Shelby, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, I'll just do my little intro. Bojo Kakanawia, Shelby Indigenous, Airline and Donji, and then Bigi Wekudan Inda, Name Bendodam. Hello, everybody. It's nice to be here. My name is Shelby. I'm from Ireland, but lived in Thunder Bay for most of my life. I'm Suckerfish Clan, and I guess to answer the question about challenges, I don't know. I think having that connection, you know, like to fully immerse yourself in that land and be totally vulnerable and like open, it really humbled me in ways, like my experiences. But the challenges of just like, I think the biggest one maybe was just like kind of sore muscles or my like shoulders, because I wasn't used to like canoeing for days on end. But just like stretching and just trying to like find that peace within myself to balance out my like the 4 quadrants of my own health, to, you know, kind of balance out like maybe the physical pain that I had, or if I was feeling lonely. And I kind of felt alone, a little bit lonely the first couple of days, like visiting my family and my partner, you know. I think just totally immersing myself in the land and feeling not alone, and like looking at the school run across, you know, I'd just laugh, and I wouldn't feel alone, like looking at all of this this life that was surrounding me. So that kind of helped me, and that, I think that might have been a little challenge, but yeah.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. I mean, you've captured the challenges in all different aspects. Sometimes we only think of the physical, but that concept of having a new social circle or that loneliness is certainly something we see from folks who go out. And, you know, I certainly face that, and I have read that in Adam's writing as well. But Sooriya, I mean, maybe you can speak to that. What keeps you going when you're facing
Hey
these
guys, thank you for letting me speak. Thank you. For me, what pushed me a lot and made me persevere, I wouldn't say it was on just one trip, but if not all of them, was my instructors. It's because we would always have to do all this work, right? Portage, canoe, carry load, cook, get wood, get fire. There's so much work that has to be done. But what made me like just go full out was watching the instructors, because when I was on the trip the first couple of days, I was lazy. Like I'm a lazy person to begin with before, and going on this trip and getting thrown into like this forest and saying, you know, do all this, it like I didn't like it. And then all the other kids that I was with, they didn't like it either. You know, it's a lot of work. But the instructors, they did a lot more work than we did. If not, they took on our task, and they didn't complain. They literally did our work that we didn't want to do, and they would just do it. So by like day 3, even day 2, day 3, it was like bothering me, like, you know, I have to like do just as much as them and pick up the load and keep going. And I wanted to just match their level of energy. And, you know, just even like they didn't even complain. You know, there was mosquitoes. I mean, like when you go from eating good outside fast food to now eating like camp food, it's all different, right? So it was just like their mentality of it all is what kept me going. I was just shadowing them.
That's amazing. I love that perspective. I know, you know, our instructor team works really hard to be role models and kind of pass that off. And, you know, some groups, you know, we really try and push people to glom to that. So I'm really glad to hear that worked in that case.
Yeah,
and I love the honesty of like, I didn't really like it. I was trying to figure it out. Yeah.
No, it's true. All the trips and all the instructors, I have not met like one instructor that I did not like. If anything, I like miss all of them after the trip.
Well, that's amazing. Amazing. Adam, to bring it back to you, I mean, you talk about personal leadership and resilience, and those are really strong themes through your work, as is fear even, and I'm wondering if you can talk about how the outdoors has helped you kind of further develop those skills and contribute to all of the work that you've done in your success.
Well, I would say like I don't really I try not to get stressed out about anything. If it's not a polar bear outside my tent trying to eat me or something, it's not a big deal. That's my theory. So I try to keep everything in perspective. Try to keep an even keel and even temperament, and never really get too worried about anything. Because in the grand scheme of things, if it's not life threatening, I guess it's not that big a deal. If you're not dealing with something that's so I always try to look on the bright side of things and be optimistic. I'm a big believer in the power of positive thinking. I think that alone has carried me through many of my adventures and journeys, is just being an optimist and always seeing the sunny side of things and thinking, oh, well, there's an upside to everything. When the black flies are thick as storm clouds around you, that's just extra protein because you've lost a lot of weight over the last 3 or 4 months. And as I inhale and exhale and I'm breathing in all these black flies, I'm just swallowing them, and that's a nice supplement to my bland ration. So I just try to look on the bright side of everything and be optimistic and positive, and most of the time it seems to get me through any sort of rough patch I ever find myself in. So that's kind of my approach.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you've got a different perspective of opening tents and finding muskox out your door, and interactions with polar bears, and all of those kind of really do give you that perspective of how to manage, I think, in a very different way than we do as you're talking about sitting in traffic, answering emails and all of that. Mm-hmm. That's great. And Sooriya, I mean, you started a not-for-profit, which is a really incredible story, and just out of everything that's been happening in the world. And I'm wondering, what inspired you to do it, and can you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, so my non-for-profit is pretty much just a house. I'll tell you what it is to understand it. So it's just a house on the side of a main street. I purposely got it beside a hospital, and what is there is like there's food. So this is a house for people with very bare minimum, absolutely no money, no job, and they need a meal, like life or death kind of meal, right? So that's what I pretty much set up, and I put it beside the hospital purposely because just in case if I don't have people come and eat, every day I can feed up to 60 adults, 70 sometimes, and that's every day, 7 days. It's been happening for 2 months now, and if there is food left over, it will go to the hospital, and the hospital is nothing is free there, so people that already come there have no money, so a little food would go a long way. And in the afternoon in my house, there's kids. Kids would come I have 142 kids signed up right now. And originally I only got one teacher, right? So I hired a teacher who's a university student there. Well, she's not in it yet, but she's gonna be. And so I wanted to hire a teacher, but not too expensive. So I went that route where somebody who needs money to go to college or university, but at the same time they can teach kids, right? So I had one teacher at first, but now I have 2 teachers, both students, and they teach English, pretty much English and whatever homework the kids need help with. Why I opened that house, when I just opened it, you had to go back to February when COVID was at its peak, and my country got hit not the worst, but it's so underdeveloped. There's no the hospitals isn't the best. So in case if there was a big outbreak, we would have no chance. And I think the government saw that, so they locked the whole country down, right? And where I'm from the north of Sri Lanka, which is a little bit more of a countryside. And like the village side, if you lock a village down, there's no means of getting money, food. Everything is still a little old school there, right? So there's people who wake up every day and sell coconut or sell milk. They have to do daily work to get money, right? So in February, because everything got shut down, you couldn't even leave your house. There was people literally dying every day just because they had no food, right? I saw it on the news, and then I spoke to my mom, and then we didn't have like time to collect money, so I gave her $2,000. I'm like, okay, let's see what we can do with this. And I didn't think I can go too far with $2,000, but it ended up feeding 500 families of like 4 or 5 people, and it fed them for 10 days straight. So all I did was send the money back to my aunt. She went and got rice, lentils, like stuff that you can keep for a long time without expiring. So sugar, just little things that can keep you going. And we gave it out, and it held that. It was good for 10 days, but as that 10 days was getting closer, we were hoping like they would stop the lockdown and maybe open it up for a couple of days, but it didn't. So I opened a GoFundMe. That GoFundMe, I wanted to do the exact same thing, but it's just I don't have another $2,000 to give away and get more food. So I wanted to open a GoFundMe, and I put the limit to $3,000, and all the money was gonna go for just rice and the same exact things I bought. Overnight, I got 3,000, and the next day 8,000. So I was like, oh my god, like $8,000. What am I gonna do with this? Way too much money. So I also reached out to a bunch of people here too that's from that village. I asked them for help, not financially, but if they wanted to buy food themselves and then give it to me so I can give it out. So that takes away some work for them. And a lot of people actually supported me. I had this one gentleman give me like tons of rice. But in that time, after the whole $8,000 I collected, I was able to feed like over 2,000 something families. And it was for days, and then we delivered to other villages nearby, disabled people. And after that, everything was good, like everything worked out. Lockdown ended, but my village is still a little underdeveloped and there's not a lot happening there. That's why I wanted to open this house, so just to stop people from actually dying, because that was an actual problem, right? So the house is going good right now and no issues. We just have a lot of kids coming in. But why I decided to do all this is because like you had to go back to why, like, I'm from there originally. My early days in my childhood, I was there up until I was 8 years old, and I actually grew up in this village, and I went to school there and stuff. And during the time I was there, it was a little bit hard because there was a civil war happening, so you couldn't go to school every day. Actually, you couldn't even go outside every day. It was like lockdown for us back then, right? So it was really hard, and there was some days where we had like airstrikes, and we have to go into the orphanage, and we sleep at the orphanage with all the orphan kids, the whole family, right? So it wasn't really easy living there, and then you had to always move around and stuff, so we don't have to go to school and stuff. And that was one thing, and then we had the tsunami happen in 2004. That like took everything, literally everything. Only thing that was left from our house was the foundation, right? But during that time, that was a 2004 tsunami that happened in December. Um, After that, like we were homeless. Like I was homeless, and we had to stay in camps, like these rescue camps. Um, we lived in tents with like tons of people, and I still like vividly remember to this day. Lots of people came over from like other countries. They brought like food, books, school supplies, everything that was kind of lost, right? So all that people came and they really took care of us. But they even gave us like medicine and everything. Eventually, like we left Sri Lanka, we couldn't stay there. We had nothing, so we sold our property and came here out in like 2008. And I haven't been back since 2017. So it's been like a long time since I went back. And when I went back, my village was the same. Absolutely nothing changed from the time I was there when I left. And when I went back in 2017, same. It was still dry, and nobody was doing anything. Still a lot of poverty, hunger, and kids not going to school. So when I was there in 2017, I didn't really like coming back. I had like this really like sad feeling that now I'm coming back from my vacation, and my village, even my family, they're all like doing bad, right? So 2017, I think I was 19. No, I was 20. I was 20, and I was just like starting my like school, my career. So I couldn't really do anything. I was like a guy with a lot of ideas, but nothing to do, right? So no money. I can't even travel. I can't do anything. So I just held that thought in my head, and I focused on school. 3 years later, now I'm an HVAC mechanic. I have a really good work. My company is really good, and I'm generating money now. And that's why after this February project with the GoFundMe, I wanted to do something permanent, right? And the food thing, I'm only doing it because there's a problem right now with COVID, and still a lot of people are not really getting like money. But I will further down in line, and that my original goal was to open a place for kids. My main focus is the kids. I have a plan. I want to go back to my village and like make it better. But permanently, right? Not just for right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm more oriented on like focus on the kids. I want to get them learning English. I want to like I buy bicycles for them. They don't have lights, I'll get them lights.
Amazing.
Whatever it is, like I'm always communicating with them, and my aunt back home is like doing that on my behalf. She's going around doing everything.
I
And
think, oh, sorry.
sorry?
Oh, I just was going to say, it's amazing to hear, you know, the build up, as you're saying, you know, your inspiration, it's not just from February. It's amazing to hear the whole build up and the whole story, and incredible what you're doing. I mean, as you said, you know, people are dying and you're motivated to do something about it. And
Yeah.
I think it's really inspiring, and I'm thankful, and I'm sure everybody here is really thankful for you being so open and sharing your story. And it's just incredible to hear that work that you've done.
Thank you. Yeah, it's still ongoing. This is just something small,
Yeah.
right? In the future, my plan is to have an orphanage, and I want to retire in that village, and I want to live out my orphanage and take care of kids, and pretty much have the later of my days be more focused there. And I think like me doing all these trips, it helped me a lot, just personally. It just set me on that task, right? It made me focus. Because after doing all these trips, I remember like the first 2 weeks, I would just be itching to do stuff. Like I need to do this, do that. Because I'm so used to doing all that stuff on the trip, I was always looking for. But now I'm just like way more focused on just that. So I have like no other hobbies. I abandoned everything. I don't like cars. I don't like this. I just want just that house, and every money and every single dollar I make is just going to that house.
That's really great. It's amazing, Sooriya. Thank you so much for sharing. I want to make sure that we get to hear from Shelby as well. You know, I'd love to keep hearing more about that, Sooriya, but it's a great seed you've planted, and a really incredible thing. Shelby, I'm glad I saw you dropped off for a second. I'm glad you made it back in. You know, your journey this past summer on your expedition, you know, it was very focused on connecting to nature and the land. And I'm just wondering if you can share a bit about your inspiration about going on the expedition, and maybe, you know, it's been maybe 2 months since you came off of trip, and how that's impacted you, or what you've noticed so far.
Yeah. Thank you for that story too, the nonprofit and everything. It's so good, like food security is so important, you know? Yeah, so for my trip, I went and I applied to go to the later one kind of in October, but that one got canceled due to not enough people signing up because of COVID. But so I went, and it was pretty out of the blue. Like they emailed me maybe a week before asking if I wanted to go on the early one. And I was a little hesitant at first, you know, I was a little anxious. And but after talking to like one of my elders, he and his wife like really convinced me to, and he is from Matagami too, so kind of in the same region of land. And yeah, so I went, and it was amazing. And like I said, I was feeling a little bit lonely, like maybe the first day, just because it was so like just out of my comfort zone, maybe, you know, and I've never really done a trip like this before. Yeah, and it just gives me motivation to, you know, do more of this. But while I was out there, I felt, when I fully immersed myself into the land, I felt so, you know, calm, and I felt like there was just so many things like talking to me. There was this, I tell this story to everybody when I went on the trip, is so my grandfather, he grew up on a point called Poplar Point, and I've always loved poplar trees. So when I was, we were in this old growth forest one day, and we were measuring trees, and these trees were like 200 plus years old, and I just found it so fascinating and beautiful. So that day I hugged a poplar tree, and I was thinking about my grandfather, and you know, he's passed on to the spirit world. So I was hugging this tree, and I was thinking so much of him. And that night I actually had a dream of him for the first time in like a long time. I've never had a vivid dream like that about him. And so pretty much he looked at me, and he didn't recognize me, you know, because I was young when he passed away. But that's one of the big reasons why I went on the trip, was to connect with my ancestors, to connect with the land, the animals, the plants, everything that was so alive, you know, and also with myself. So, you know, when I was there, I dreamt that, and I hugged him in that dream, like I hugged the poplar tree that night. And right away he recognized me, and it was just so much emotion that I was feeling just for that dream. Yeah, but throughout the trip, it was very impactful for my emotional, you know, well-being, and it helped me calm down and relax and not, yeah, like focus on emails and anything in the technology world, you know. So it was nice to fully like get away from that, and I felt so calm. And with these big dreams that I was having, I got actually gifted an eagle feather while I was there. I think it's from my grandfather, who I dreamt about and who I was thinking of. And I want to show you guys because I have it right here, and it's really important. And here's a feather, but I feasted this. I've been in ceremony in the lodge with it now, but it's I just have so much respect for it, and just seeing that connection of being gifted that while I was out there, it was so beautiful. And I'm gonna take that memory with me for the rest of my life, because I have this such sacred item with me now. And so like feasting it and talking about food, and I was like trying to find what foods I could eat while I was out there, because I do work with the Indigenous food circle. And yeah, like during COVID, it was hard, you know, food security is super important. So throughout my work, we were going to communities with good food boxes to give food to communities. And I think just it's so important to get out to the land, to know how to navigate the land, and, you know, not know the power of such this powerful, you know, earth that we live on. It is humbling. It's inspiring to be out there and to live with these currents that we have in our life. You know, I'd look at the water, and it would just, the wave from a boat would come, and it would take about a few minutes for it to actually reach the shore. So actually like listening and, you know, fully observing while I was out there was very impactful for me. Yeah, and just looking at the animals and letting go of that control. I think of you know, getting to maybe point A to point B it was a lot more flexible than, you know, I thought we'd have to go to be here and then get there in one day. But it was very nice to work with, you know, the rest of the participants and then the instructors to kind of see where we would like to go through that day. And all we had to think about was what we're going to eat for, you know, what we're going to eat. And I didn't even know what time it is. I didn't know what time it was most of the time. So it was just nice to really have like, where are we going? And then what are we eating? And everything was able to kind of fall into place how it was supposed to. So yeah, that's kind of, I guess, my perspective and experience of living in that land and exploring.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. I mean, you've described really well the stripping away that we do when we go out on the land. You know, the absence of all of those external stimuluses, and how we get down to, you know, our core and that connection with the world that's just around us, quite literally just around us in those moments. You've described that really incredibly, and I think your dream speaks to that as well. And I'm so glad that you have that that feather there still with you, and a part of your journey going forward. That's a really beautiful story. I think getting back to Adam, I mean, that really resonates with some of your writing as well. But thinking of your journeys that you've gone on, I mean, this pandemic has been a time of isolation that has been a resounding part of all of this. And, you know, we're standing at the doorstep of winter and facing, you know, the rising numbers that are happening, and you're choosing isolation all the time. You're choosing these solo expeditions and to go out on an adventure and face the challenges that are part of that. And then, you know, ultimately that isolation that you're choosing through those solo journeys ends, and you come back into these places where those external stimuluses are, you know, the emails and the traffic and all of those things that Shelby just stripped away. You know, can you speak to how you face those challenges of going into isolation, but then also coming out? Sometimes I know when I come off a trip, that's almost more jarring than going in.
Yeah, I'll take the isolation any day of the week. I like to say I was social distancing before it was mainstream. I mean, I love solitude, but to me, that's part of the joy of being out in the wild, is to get away from it all. And I guess it suits, I mean, everyone is cut from a different cloth, and not everyone's cup of tea is the same. But for me, I love the solitude. It's not so much a challenge, it's something I really embrace. I mean, I love the freedom and simplicity that comes with wandering alone across the wild. And you can do as you please, you can sleep where you please, you can push on if you please. I really enjoy that. I think it's something that everyone would benefit from if we had a little more time alone on our own. I think that's a good thing. And I always try to stay a little bit disconnected every day of my life, no matter where I am. I make a point of walking in the woods, which I'm lucky I'm able to do. I have a wood forest all around me. And up until 3 years ago, I didn't even own a phone. I bought my first phone when I was 31 because I like to be disconnected. And then by that point, my publisher and everyone else was saying, you're impossible to get a hold of. You need to make some compromises here. So I did get into a little bit of that, but I feel like I don't want to go too far down that route, or else it takes me away from the essence of the things I love. But it's part of being part of the modern world is you have to you can't be nostalgic and try to cling to something that's unrealistic. So I just try to take it as all part of all comes with the territory. And I know when I come back from being in the woods, I might have to work a little harder in terms of getting caught up on emails and things, but I just sort of buckle down and do it and say, the sooner I get this over with, the sooner I can go back and do what I love doing. So I just try to take each side as it comes and do both if I have to.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I think at this point, I'd love to get to some of the questions that have come in. And there's one, Adam, here for you that I think I'm going to start with. In your book, A History in 10 Maps, you delve into the history of Canada's exploration by Europeans. And although some are described as being respectful to the Indigenous people they encounter, many were not. This aspect of our history is prominent these days. How do you feel about that conversation? As somebody who obviously loves and respects the land and its First Nations, how do you reconcile yourself with this history? And perhaps maybe Shelby can comment as well. Maybe we'll start with Adam and then go to Shelby.
Well, that's a very simple question. I'm sure I can answer that in like 10 seconds. That's very similar to my PhD. I have a PhD in Indigenous history from McMaster University, and I spent like 8 years researching that. And it's all about how Indigenous knowledge and mythology influence people in the fur trade, particularly in the subarctic and the West Coast. And it's hard to paint with big brushstrokes because there's so many people, as I was just saying a minute ago, who are cut from different cloths. And you'll find the entire spectrum from European explorers who were like Franklin, Sir John Franklin, extremely dismissive of Indigenous knowledge, in his case, the Dene. They were telling him, like, I really don't think it's a good idea to push on at this latitude, this late in the season. Winter's going to strike. And Franklin was like, oh, no, I'm sure we'll be fine. It's only August. What's the worst that can happen? We won't get any snow. And then that turned out very badly for all concerned because Franklin failed to heed their warning. And if he had, more of his men may have survived. But then you have the other end of the spectrum where you have people like, let me think here, David Thompson, who are totally immersed in that world from childhood, right? Essentially an orphan who at the age of 13 is shipped off into the hinterland, and then he learns the language and he marries Charlotte Small, a Métis woman, and that becomes his worldview. You think about it, we generally think of someone's teenage years as their formative years when you're shaping and molding them. And in the fur trade, a lot of those Scottish and French Canadians, they were sent into the fur trade as adolescents. We wouldn't even think of them as adults, but they were like 13 or 14, and they were sent into that world. And for the most part, they would stay in it for at least 30 years, if not longer. And, their life expectancy wasn't that long. So for them, that was pretty much all they knew. And if you read some of their diaries and letters, it's really extraordinary. People like Alexander Mackenzie writing things 200 years ago that would fit in really well with the times. He seems like he could be in 2020 and his views would align very well, criticizing European colonialism and European imperialism and saying this is terrible and the fur trade doesn't do anything to benefit these people. So that's two examples of two contemporaries who lived in the same time, Franklin and Thompson and Mackenzie, but they all had, diametrically opposite views. So I'd say that, you have to, if you really want to dig deep into the past, and I think most people don't really want to be bothered going through tedious letters of people from centuries ago, it's full of surprises, and you'll find people from every possible viewpoint, much like today the world is polarized and we have people who have different views on these things and they're bitterly opposed. And it's interesting to see these same debates playing out earlier in Canada's history.
Yeah, and I think what compounds that is, you know, there are those letters and journals, as you're saying, and there are also not those journals and letters and the oral histories. So I'm curious, Shelby, if you have comment on that question.
Sorry, what was the question again? I heard a couple different things.
Sure, just about, you know, it talks about Adam's work looking at the history of Canada's exploration by Europeans and, you know, the interactions with Indigenous people. And, you know, obviously that's a prominent part of today's conversation and just exploring Adam's feelings about that. You know, sometimes that interaction may have been positive and sometimes perhaps less so. I don't know if this is an area where you hold some knowledge, but if you have any comment.
Yeah, there's such a big history with Indigenous and non, and you know, that's in my blood too. Is you know, I have Métis, you know, Scottish and Cree Anishinaabe. It's all kind of a little mutt form now, but yeah, like I think just we all need to just try to listen and understand with compassion on both sides, you know. And even for me, it's living in Thunder Bay, there is a lot of segregation, and I think there's segregation on both sides, you know, where Indigenous only want Indigenous, and yes, we need our own spaces with, like, you know, culture and ceremonial things, but also like we should be able to, you know, learn with non-Indigenous, you know, and, you know, immigrants, and be more open to learning with each other. And that's what, like, you know, some of the treaties were meant to be, is to work together and learn together. And, you know, I see a lot of hate, and it is really hard, like emotionally, like even with the news this week, all this news about, you know, racism and, you know, even just Indigenous people wanting to have lobster, you know, to sustain themselves. It's this big, you know, big political thing now, where I think honestly, like, Canada should maybe build more of a framework on the system of, you know, Indigenous perspective and ways of knowing in a more governance and circular structure. But, you know, I think there's a lot of work to be done, definitely. And that's why I do the work that I do with the Indigenous Food Circle and my own personal, like, learning and unlearning, and just exploring all these different ways of knowing, is to just have more understanding and compassion and patience too. I think this trip taught me a lot about patience and like, yeah, like letting go of some of that control to just be present and to see what's right, and to listen and observe, to see what feels good, you know. I'm all about in yeah, feeling things. And so yeah, just patience, but also yeah, we need to all work together. And also just with the climate crisis, and that's also part of the Indigenous ways of knowing, is to only take what you need, and to give and work as a community, because we all have our own strengths and our own weaknesses, you know. But when we work together as a community, that all these big strengths will come together, and then it will form a more healthier, holistically, you know, community for Canada and for, you know, Turtle Island and, you know, this planet.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's not a light question by any stretch of the imagination. Reconciliation is it's a long journey, and, you know, Adam, you capture and have studied, you know, those early explorers, and you know, we've been on a journey as, you know, a nation, and prior to being a nation, and, you know, we're still on that journey and that path forward. And Shelby, I think you've touched on some really great points of, you know, the work that we need to do about bringing in the, you know, the four directions and the circularity of all of that. And I think that's ever present too, when you're just out there on the land and connecting and having those lessons of patience as well. Yeah. I would love to keep this conversation going, and I lament to say, you know, we're winding down to the end of our time. You know, I think it's great to leave even me wanting more. So I'm just super thankful, Adam, Sooriya, and Shelby, that you could join us and share your stories and your perspectives. And I hope for folks listening that you got a lot out of it. I'm going to pass it over to Andrew to close it off, but really just a real heartfelt thanks for those stories that the three of you were able to share.
Yes, great. Yeah, thank you to all of our panelists for joining, and I agree. I mean, we can probably easily spend the whole afternoon here together, and I think we've only just scratched the surface. So yes, thank you so much, and thank you to all the folks who have joined today. This has been recorded as well, and so please you'll get a link, and feel free to rewatch or share it as we go forward. I think just as we close here, one of the things that we are Outward Bound does rely on is our ability to raise money through donations and through support from our community. And I would just encourage folks, if you've been inspired by the folks who are on this call or others in your path who've been interacting with Outward Bound Canada, if you would consider in your year-end philanthropy goals, just consider Outward Bound as part of that, and we would be eternally grateful for that. So. And I would also just encourage you to check out our new social return on investment and impact report as well. Just some of the themes that were picked up here, by Shelby, Adam, and Sooriya about their experience and the impact that Outward Bound has in terms of their own journeys is something that we try to repeat over and over again. So any contribution you can make through the year end here would be so meaningful. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining. Thank you again to our panelists, and thank you for being part of Outward Bound. It's been great to be with you. Thank you.